Now, I just wanted to say a couple words today because I don't know, maybe I have some thoughts about metaphysics. And I haven't talked a lot about metaphysics to anybody, and I probably have thought a lot about it. The other day I was watching Jeopardy, and they had on the Bible as one of the subjects. And I know that sounds like I'm bragging, but a lot of times I could actually win on Jeopardy. Not like half the time, but some like a quarter of the time. But one of the subject matters that I always do really well on is the Bible. And that's kind of a weird thing. In other words, one time at one point in my life, I tried to sit down and read the entire Bible, which is a pretty big task, actually. The Bible is really long. So I started at Genesis, and went to what is it, Deuteronomy and Exodus and all that, and went all the way about halfway through the Old Testament, and I started getting into Jeremiah's and stuff like that. And really, it's old-fashioned writing in the Bible. It's very old-fashioned writing, where they just never get to the point. They say, I guess it's a chronicle too. There's one called Chronicles, is a book of the Bible, and then there's Psalms, and there's my favorite Old Testament. By the way, my favorite Old Testament book in the Bible is Ecclesiastes, and it's maybe one of the later written books in the Bible as well. So the point being, as you follow literature, it actually evolves. It actually gets closer to what is a modern literature as time goes by. And even if you go back just 200 years, the writing was kind of old-fashioned. It's become more and more readable as we've progressed it's just like other technologies. We've improved it. And the Bible is old-fashioned technology. Now the Gospels are usually more readable. But they read kind of like oral traditions. So let's talk about the New Testament a little bit too. The New Testament I know extremely well, especially the Gospels, because I grew up and went to 8 years of Catholic school, and that was the only subject I was good at, was religion. You know, I was they didn't like me. They smacked me around, and for some reason I was good at religion. I thought it was the most interesting class. But now I have my own children. They're grown up now, so they're not children. But I have my own offspring, and I did not raise them in any type of a church, any type of a religion. And, I know some of you out there are probably outraged by this fact. How could you, who was raised as a Catholic, have decided to not raise your children in any religion at all? Where are they going to get their morals from and all that, you might ask yourself? Well, the answer is, my kids are fairly moral. They're not going out and robbing banks and beating people up. And as a matter of fact, my daughter's extremely moral. She's more moral than a lot of the Catholic girls that I've known in many ways. And my son, well, he's not that much different than I am, I guess, or maybe he's a little bit. Sometimes I wonder if maybe I shouldn't have had him go to church a little bit, or had some moral upbringing more than he did, but don't let him hear him say that. I say this stuff, and when I'm saying it, who's going to ever listen to me about this stuff? It's going to be put out on the internet, and maybe in 100 years, my great-grandchildren say, what was my great-grandfather like? And maybe they'll be able to look this up, on the computer or on the internet and say, man, that's what he was like. There's what he was like right there. If I have great-grandchildren. So maybe none of us will. But what is the metaphysical reality of the world. That's kind of the point. And I, somewhere along the line, after going to 8 years of Catholic school and reading almost the entire Bible, I mean, I didn't read the entire Bible. I skipped over parts. Got a little tedious. But I read the entire New Testament and about more than half of the Old Testament. And let me just say that I decided that, yeah, the Bible is fine. It's a good book. It's for one thing, it's one of the oldest texts in the world, where you chronicle, just like, I guess, Homer is really old too, and Aristotle is really old, but the Bible is really old too. It's about the same age as Homer, I think. So you get an idea of early human culture when you read it. And some of it is just, we've evolved beyond what the people believed in the Old Testament, where they had slaves and they went to killed all the people who were in the land that they didn't like, and they wiped them all out, and they smote them with a jaw's ass and all that kind of stuff. And we are still doing that kind of stuff, don't get me wrong, but we aren't agreeing that it's a moral thing like what they used to believe in the Old Testament. And I don't want to go into the some of the other bad parts about my point is that I read that, and I went to the Catholic school, and I hung around with a lot of Catholics and everything, and a bunch of Protestants, and I know some Muslims, and I even know some Hindus, and I'm not sure that any of them have it right. I mean, for one thing, you can't follow the Bible because it's wrong, just literally wrong on so many physical realities. Like, when Jesus says the stars will fall to earth, well, he can't mean the stars are falling to earth, but that's what it says, right? So you're supposed to believe what it says because a star is about 10,000 times larger than the earth, so it would be more like the earth falling to a star. But the stars aren't just like what they used to think they are. They're not just like tiny little things hanging in the sky. They're humongous, giant balls of hydrogen burning 10 trillion miles away or 10 billion miles away, and they're way, way bigger than the Earth, But Jesus had no idea about that. That was not something that he could even comprehend. He's supposed to be God. He's supposed to know everything. Well, that. But what is reality? That's, maybe it'll come around full circle. Maybe when we blast our spaceships out into outer space and fly for 20 light years in the one direction or something like that, maybe this is something that's just, like the Matrix. It's an inward reality. It doesn't really exist. They're like Dr. Barkley said, or what is his name? Not Dr. Barkley. But he said that there is no physical reality at all, but that everything is just in the mind of God. So, the problem with that is, of course, what they have, like determinism and all that. The problem with that idea is if everything is just in the mind of God, then what's the use? We got no choice in the matter. It's all in the mind of God. God is in. There's sort of it makes everything okay. There is no morality under that situation, because anything that happens is just what God made happen. And if God is the all-powerful and all-good and all-knowing being, then why should we even try to do anything? Charlie Manson is good, and Adolf Hitler is good, and Ted Bundy is good, because that's just what God made that happen, Now they're trying. Now the other way of looking at it, people say, well, there's a evil force and a good force in the world, and we have to choose between the evil force and the good force. Well, then that assumes, with that, by any logic that I can understand, that God is fallible. God is weak. He's not all powerful. He's not omnipotent, because if he has to fight against something that he can't control, then he can't control everything, and therefore, God is not omnipotent. That's I guess that's fine. I mean, it doesn't upset me if God is not omnipotent. I mean, but some people, it contradicts their thinking. The same people who think that there's a devil and evil and there's a God and good are the same people who would tell you that God is omnipotent. So rationally, it makes no sense. Personally, I don't know what the nature of reality is. I suspect that there's something like a spiritual realm that exists. And what that spiritual realm is may not be, almighty. It might just be another dimension, or there may be more unseen parts of reality that we can even come close to understanding. That's really what I think might really be the case. Perhaps, there's what we see with our senses and hear what, with our senses is only a portion of reality, And then there's the vastness of space you got to think about too. Is it possible that the vastness of space can be circumvented somehow by another reality, by another dimension? That I don't know. So my version of what I bet on, and I think I've said this before in other videos, is I always play like the percentages. If I find something that's indisputably true in my opinion, or that's mostly anyway, then that I would consider to be true, but only because the evidence points to that fact. I don't think that way because somebody told me I had to think that way, but I try to weigh everything upon the evidence that's there. I don't try to, take anybody's word for anything. So I guess I have not much faith, and then I would say that I am nothing more than a biological creature. Like I don't even. Some people have a problem with this, but I don't see that much difference between me and like a dog or a raccoon or a some bird or a lizard. I think we just happen to be the mentally strongest of all those creatures that we know of, and and they may see other realms of reality that we don't see, maybe, and it doesn't make that much difference. Now Hindus believe that sometimes. The cows have a greater understanding of certain types of reality and so forth, but I don't know. Far as I could tell, we're clever monkeys. We're clever primates, and we're dominating the world to a large extent. Whether Donald Trump likes that idea or not, whether the Christians like that idea or not, we are dominating the world. And I just want to say that in the future, everybody's worrying about all this dystopian reality, that the destruction of the planet that we're bringing about and everything. I think if we're smart as people, we can work together. We can organize ourselves better than we have so far, and we can work to bring about something of a. I know this is people don't like to hear this, but something like more like an eternal life, or we can do a physical and mechanical conjuncture, where we are able to upload our brains into a computer in the future. That's something that may actually happen, so that maybe not my generation, but maybe the next generation or the one after that may have like live for like thousands of years or so. And humanity may be able to survive longer and longer than people ever think. But we have to work together to do it. We have to be more positive about working together. There's a lot of this division being sown right now, and it's all being sown by people who are hanging on to that old-fashioned reality, religion and so forth. I think if you try to take yourselves on a more physical, provable, scientific reality, I think we have a possibility of a much greater future. Now, that's my opinion.